Welcome to today's talk about what shows up when you have a diagnostic bioresonance scan and how we can treat ourselves when we've got the information from the scan versus how we can treat ourselves with bioresonance when we haven't had a scan. So I'm just going to share my screen. So let's start here. Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Great. So starting. So can you see this slide, which I've changed to?
Yes.
Perfect. Good. Always good to check because sometimes the second slide doesn't show up, I have found. So I'm going to talk you through a scan which I had myself when I first got into bioresonance a few years ago. So I went to have a diagnostic bioresonance scan, and as a result of that, had this report about my health. And it looks a little bit like gobbledygook, as it does to many people who have a scan. So I wanted to talk through this and give you some information about what shows up, because it's actually very fascinating. Now, when we have a diagnostic health assessment scan, there are potentially thousands of things we could test for, which would take a long time. So what we usually do is do what you could think of as a basic scan, looking for some of the basic bits of information we want to know more about in terms of a client's health, and also testing for different possible pathogens and microorganisms based on the client's case history and what they say they have issues with. So we can look into all sorts of things. We could make many tests for different areas of health. What I'm going to show you is just the basic test. And we start looking at cellular function and the energy that we have in our cells. So kind of looking at our foundation building blocks, if you like. So if you look up here, we have a little arrow that can move between cellular reserves, which are drying up. So this is when someone's really quite ill and they have zero energy, to very high reserves. Now, it's not necessarily good to have them right up here either. We want them somewhere here in the middle range. So this gives us some readings about the cell's ability to adapt, about the energy that is there in the cells available to it. And then we have blocked reserves adaptation, which again are looking at the energy that our cells have, but there's a block in the way, so the body can't use that energy. And we want as little block as possible, so we want the arrow to be down here. Then we start looking at cellular dystrophies. Oh, whoops. We look at cellular dystrophies. So we're looking at pathological processes around the cells. And again, we want the arrows to be down low. As they get higher, we might be experiencing structural changes within our cells. So then we start looking at cellular respiration and at the cycle our cells go through in order to respire and to metabolize the things that they need to metabolize. So I don't personally know what all of these different labels here are, but obviously we're looking at having the arrows down in the green rather than in the red. So we're looking a lot about, with these different initial tests, the energy our cells have, the energy that is available from our cells for all of our functioning, the energy that's stored, the energy that's released. And then, having looked a little at the energetic status of our cells in the diagnostic test, we move on to look at stress levels. So we start looking at the psychovegetative load. So the stress on the sympathetic nervous system, the stress in the adrenal glands in particular. And as with all of these indicators, that green is where we want to be and red is kind of high alert. We don't really want to be up there. So at the time when I had this test, there was a little bit of stress going on in my system, but it wasn't too much. And this is a good indicator of general stress, the sort of stress someone might feel when they say, oh, I feel stressed, I feel tired, I feel wound up, that sort of thing. So then we look more specifically at the autonomic nervous system. We look at the stress there. And then, interestingly, we move from looking at stress to looking at exhaustion. So we don't want our systems to be exhausted, and it's very difficult for them to bounce back. So with some people, this autonomic exhaustion level will be a lot higher, and that's an indication that there's a lot of imbalance and things are going out of whack. We really need to support the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And then we start looking at different forms of stress. We look at the immune system and the stress in the immune system, because of course, if somebody's constantly having allergies, allergic reactions, coughs, colds, and acute inflammations, that's going to act as a stress in the immune system. So it gives us an indication of whether there's something going on where the immune system is very active and having to fight that. Autoimmune processes are another area where there might be stress to the immune system. But luckily, again, when I had this test, there wasn't a great deal of stress in my immune system. Of course, if you have a lot of acute stress, if the immune system's constantly under stress, it will become exhausted at some point. And this is often the point when there might be a chronic inflammatory condition that started in the body. The immune system really begins to get depleted, weakened, and exhausted. So we have a reading for immune system exhaustion, which again, with some clients, if they come with long-term chronic difficult conditions, that exhaustion might have a higher reading here. So then we can start beginning to look at toxicity levels. Now, as you know, the liver deals a lot with toxins. So the first thing we're looking at is the condition of the liver. How is the liver functioning? Is it doing a good job? And in my case, it was. If you have a client with, for instance, who's on chemotherapy, their liver toxicity and functioning level may be a lot higher, in that it's going to be under more stress, it's going to be working harder, it's going to be under the influence of more toxins. So this is a good indicator of how the liver's functioning. And then we look at toxicity. So when I first got involved with bioresonance and had this scan, I had some toxins. They weren't too bad in my liver. Obviously, the younger you are, the less toxins there'll be, and generally the older you are, the more toxins there are. And of course, if you are, if you've had quite a toxic life, if you've spent a life on different drugs, living in an environment, an area that's environmentally polluted, etc., your liver may be dealing with more toxins, and this arrow may be higher along the scale. And then we look at the accumulation of fat in the liver. So again, depending on someone's diet and lifestyle, this may be higher. This is quite a good reading here. So we get a bit of an idea about the state of the liver and how it's working and how it's dealing with its toxins. Now, when the liver can't deal with processing so many toxins anymore, those toxins and a lot of the kind of microorganisms we might unknowingly absorb in our bodies, they spill over into something called the extracellular matrix, which is what this slightly odd looking bottom part of this slide is showing us. So here we have an indicator of how congested, how full of toxins the extracellular matrix is. Now, the extracellular matrix basically means the space between our cells and our blood vessels, or our vessels. And it's here that toxins tend to accumulate. So first we look at how congested and how toxic that space between cells and vessels is. And again, if somebody was on heavy duty drugs, they might have a reading that's up here in the red, which would be a real call to help and support the liver. The older the person is, the more the reading will be at the higher end, and the younger the person is, hopefully at least, the more the reading will be in the green, which of course is where we want it to be. If you look carefully, you can see this little block here has some tiny black dots on it. They appear a little bit darker, BL 5, 6 and 7. This is where I was when I had this scan. So pretty good, not too many toxins, and that corresponds with these readings up here. But the interesting thing is when someone has toxins, we want to see where they are in the extracellular matrix. Are they closer to the vessels? Because if they're nice and close to our vessels, then the toxins potentially can be moved into the vessels to be carried out of the body through the lymphatic drainage system. But if they're closer to our cells, especially if there's a lot of them, we run the risk that they might penetrate the cell membrane and become a real issue because the cells will be invaded with toxins and microorganisms. So it's really important to see where are these toxins in our client. We're not yet looking at particular organs. We'll do that later in the scan, but we're seeing, you know, how congested, how ill, if you like, is this client in terms of toxicity? Can we easily move the toxins out of their body, or are we going to take a bit of time having to clean out the extracellular matrix and move those toxins gradually away from the cell so that they don't wreak more havoc? So personally, I find this quite an interesting reading here. These are the cells and these are the vessels. And in my case, you can see these red crosses. Most of them are here, close to the vessels, rather than here, close to the cells. Whereas, again, if someone was very ill or they had been on chemotherapy for a long time, they might have many more toxins indicated over here, close to the cells. So we'd want to address that quickly and help cleanse them and detox them and break them down and get them moved over here to the vessels. So let's move on to the next slide. So now we want to start looking at the different toxic loads that we may have in our body. Now, as I said at the start of the talk, we can potentially look for and test for many, even hundreds, thousands of different substances and toxins. But it would take a long time to do that. So in this basic scan, we're just looking at the basic things that people tend to be affected by. And one of those is heavy metals. So we look at the most prevalent heavy metals, mercury, lead, cadmium, and aluminium, and see if our client has any of those present in their body. And in my case, I had quite a lot actually of mercury that I'd been trying to get rid of for years and hadn't succeeded. And thankfully now with bioresonance, I've got rid of my mercury. But at the time I had a lot of mercury residues from having had my fillings out some years ago and replaced with white ones. And that mercury had released itself into my body and created, well, too much heavy metal in me. So it was great to be able to get rid of that. Now, as well as heavy metals, one of the toxic loads that people often overlook is the load that comes from different radiation fields. So geopathic stress, radiation that's coming from the earth, from the placing of our houses and our furniture and where we sleep at night in relation to geopathic stress fields and ley lines and that sort of thing. We can also look at radioactive radiation. So if you've been exposed to nuclear radiation, we can get a reading here. Thankfully, I hadn't been. If you've had lots of X-rays, we can get a reading about how much radiation from X-rays might be stored in the body. And then this one, which everybody has a reading on these days, which is the electromagnetic load from Wi-Fi, from mobile phones, from 5G, 4G, from electrical appliances in our house. It's just really difficult to escape an electromagnetic load. So it's quite usual now for people to have a reading somewhere along this line, depending on their electromagnetic exposure. And then we move on to environmental and household toxins. The toxins you might find in cleaning products, in shampoos, skincare, cosmetic products, in our foods from pesticides, food additives, those sorts of things. And we have a reading, and I was very happy to see that I didn't have any of those, having eaten organic food religiously for years and lived in the countryside. And then we look at benzene rings loads, and these are toxins that often come from products containing petroleum. But interestingly, they show up a lot in medicines. So if you're having if you're taking drugs that the GP's given you, you may well have a benzene ring load from those medications. If you're on different hormonal treatments, if you're working with certain paints or substances used in the building trade or construction, or if you breathe in a lot of car exhaust, so if you live on a busy main road or by a motorway, this benzene ring load can show as being higher. So again, we really want to get rid of those toxins, and thankfully we can do that with bioresonance. So before we talk more about how to do that, we'll move on to the next area of the diagnostic scan, which looks at the balance between acidity and alkalinity. And when I had this scan, you can see I was a little bit into the acidic. That's quite easy to change, luckily. Yeah, some people, if they're very acidic, obviously will want to help them balance that with their alkalinity, and there's many ways of balancing pH. Then we move on to look at the lymphatic system, and depending on how active a person is, how much exercise they do, and how well their lymphatic system is working, we will have a degree of congestion here, especially at the moment. I mean, increasingly people are stuck in front of computers, as I am now giving this talk. There's a lot less need to move than there was a few decades ago. So sadly, it's not unusual to see higher levels of lymphatic congestion. So that's something we can address again with the treatment devices and help the lymphatic system work a little bit more easily with less congestion. So once we've looked at that, we start looking at indications of pathology, which is quite interesting. We look at things like whether there's an indication that our client has a chronic or an acute inflammatory process. Now, when I first had this scan, it showed that I did have a chronic inflammatory process. I can't remember what that was, but after working with the mini treatment devices, it cleared up, and this now says no. But at the time it was a yes, so that was something we addressed. It will show if there's an indication of any degenerative processes, of any autoimmune processes, or whether there's a risk that a client may be prone to autoimmune processes. We also get an indication of whether their client has an allergy or a food intolerance, and in my case at the time it was a yes to both, and so we can then go on and investigate what's the intolerance, what's the allergy, and obviously we can treat that. We can see if there's an indication for a food allergy, a phosphate sensitivity, or indications of dysbiosis in the digestive system. And again, if there is, we can look more, we can investigate more about what's going on and find ways of treating that. Now, interestingly, we also have indications of pathological changes that involve papillomas or polyps, tumours, cystic tumours, solid or cystic benign tumours. So we can see if there's anything going on. And it has been that we have had clients coming who have had a tumour or a polyp that they had no idea about, and it was picked up on the scan here, and then they were able to go and investigate that and treat themselves accordingly. So it's a very useful indication. Then we move on to some more normal imbalances in the form of nutritional deficiencies. So we can look at whether the client has any deficiencies in trace elements, minerals, vitamins, I had a magnesium deficiency at the time. We can also look at vitamin deficiencies. It says here I had a D3 deficiency at the time. We can't tell if a client has too much of a vitamin or mineral, but we can tell if there's a deficiency. And one of the really interesting things about this is that rather than rushing out and buying supplements if there is a deficiency that shows up, the best thing is just to work with the mini devices to detox that area, the extracellular matrix that I was talking about earlier. Because very often, more often than not, the client will have enough of the vitamins and minerals we need in their blood. But if that area between the blood vessels and the cells is congested with toxins, then those vitamins that are in the blood are not going to be able to diffuse through to the cells and feed the cells. So very often we find with these scans that when a client goes away and they do an initial detox with the mini devices, that when they come back and they're scanned again, suddenly they don't have a deficiency because their cells are able to use and absorb the vitamins that are actually there from their food. Obviously, there's incidences where someone might need a kind of mega boost of a particular vitamin, but it's always good to clean up the extracellular matrix first so that we can ensure that we're making use of those supplements. Now, this is interesting here, pancreatic enzymes deficiency. Now, this corresponds with here on the test where it says there's an indication of a food intolerance. So if there's a food intolerance, and in my case it said yes, what that means is that there's something or some food or some foods that I've been eating a lot of regularly, and they have overloaded my pancreas. So my pancreas can't create enough enzymes to deal with those foods that I've been overloading it with. So if there's a food intolerance, it will show up here as a yes to pancreatic enzyme deficiency. And then one of the things we can do is test and find out which foods is this person intolerant to. Then they can cut them out for a few months. And that allows the pancreas some breathing space to reset and kind of bounce back. And then with a bit of luck, those foods can be introduced, not all on the same day, not having lots and lots of them on the same day, but just being introduced and having some of them each week, but not every day, or some of them here and there. So that's a really lovely thing to be able to do to reset your pancreas, but you need to know what you need to avoid. And again, these scans will help you to do that. Now, if there's a hormone deficiency, it will say yes. And if you are a woman who's gone through the menopause, it will also say yes. So mustn't be alarmed if you get a yes to this. If you've gone through the menopause, obviously it appears that there's an imbalance because you don't have the normal range of hormones in the same quantities anymore. So then when we've looked at the deficiencies, we can move on and look at microorganism load. So we've looked at the toxins, but now we're looking at the pathogenic microorganisms. So things like mold and fungi, yeast, parasites, worms, viruses, bacterial infections, and those sorts of things. So in my case, when I had this test, I didn't have any acute viruses. I didn't have any acute bacterial loads at the time, but I did have a fungal load, and this really took me by surprise. I didn't know I had any fungal load in my body, any fungi of any sort, and I certainly didn't know I had ringworm, but I did. So here we can see my fungal load was ringworms. So that was really interesting. I worked with the mini devices to eliminate that, to help my skin, and that was all good. And now the reading is showing 0. I had a viral load. It wasn't written down at the time because the priority for treating me wasn't the viral load, but I had human papillomavirus. So that on the second or third scan I had, we looked into what was the viral load, and then I was able to work with HPV and get rid of that, which was good because it's good to get rid of those viruses, or at least permanently put them to sleep so they absolutely can't wake up and they can't do any damage. Now, at the time when I had this scan, I had a lot of reflux that I hadn't been able to get rid of. So it was interesting that it showed I had a bacterial load with Helicobacter pylori. One of the things that it can do is create reflux. So again, I was able to eliminate that with the mini devices. I had quite a large helminth load. So helminths are intestinal worms. And quite often people will show us having a helminth load and they'll feel frightfully embarrassed. Oh, I've got worms. But a lot of people do. And they're very, very easy to eliminate with the devices, which I've now done. All of these readings are 0 now on me. I've got rid of all my nasties. Helminths, and then I didn't have any protozoa. Now, as we eliminate these different microorganisms, of course, sometimes people will acquire a new one in between scans. So if they've not washed their hands and they've been, I don't know, doing some gardening and been some neighbour's cat that's left feces in your garden and you've touched them or something like that. It might be you acquire something. So we test each time someone comes for a scan to not only check that the microorganisms we've been treating have been eliminated, but to also check if there's anything new that's popped up. But the good thing is that as you work with the mini devices and detox all these toxins and heavy metals and microorganisms, etc., your immune system reciprocally becomes strengthened. And as your immune system becomes stronger and stronger, it can deal with these so that you end up not actually picking them up and taking them on. So that's a really nice other piece of work that happens automatically. Now, we can also look at different systems that might need support or that might be out of balance. And we can begin to link systems that need some support with some of the pathologies that may have shown up. In this case, green is good. The yellow is systems that might need some attention. The endocrine system, that was simply because I've been through the menopause, so my hormones were less balanced than they would have been some years before. It was flagging up my joints as being an area that might need some support, and my veins. Quite often veins show up and they're not something that I personally had really thought about before. But if people's veins are weak, there's all sorts of implications about circulation and blood flow and also things like varicose veins. So that gives us an indication of body systems that we might need to work with. We also look at any endocrine glands that might need support. So the pancreas, that's showing up because I had a food intolerance and my pancreatic enzymes were deficient. And my thyroid at the time, my thyroid was a bit dodgy. It's not anymore. And that's the end of the basic scan. So as I said, there's lots of other things we could look at, but this is the basics, which actually gives a lot of comprehensive information once you know how to read the scan properly. So when a client's had a scan, we've got information about what needs support, where the problems are, what the root causes are in terms of toxins or microorganisms. What comes next? Well, most people want to be treated. Sometimes people just want to see a scan as a kind of interesting piece of information. But most people come because they've got an issue and they want to change that issue. So they want treatment. And one of the easiest ways of treating a client is to work with these little mini bioresonance devices. I say this is one of the easiest ways simply because they're designed to be portable. So instead of a client having to come and sit at a clinic for an hour or two several times a week, which means missing work and paying lots of money, instead they can have some tailor-made programs loaded onto these mini devices and they can take them away, simply put them in their pocket and get on with their day being treated without realizing that they're being treated. And after a few months of playing the treatment programs, then they'll be ready to go in at a deeper level. So if people have had a scan, ordinarily what would happen is that they would be made some programs. based on the scan, so tailor-made programs. They would be loaded onto the mini treatment devices. We have one called the AP, which does all the work of detoxing the system. And we have one called the RITM device that does a lot of restorative, strengthening, boosting work. And after 2 to 3 months, the programs that a client will have worked with will have done their job. So they then come back and have another scan. We can see what's changed on the scan, what's detoxed, what's got stronger, what's rebalanced. And then we can remake the programs to go in at a deeper layer. And in terms of the different microorganisms and toxins, each time they come, we can peel back another layer, remove another layer of nasties until we've got rid of them all. And that's a fantastic place to get to because the system will really be strong at that point. So you can have tailor-made programs made for you, and then you simply press play on your program and put the device in your pocket and get on with it. But many people around the world can't come and have a scan because there isn't anyone offering scans in their country or near where they live. So for many, many people, they might have an issue. They might know there's an issue with their digestion or with their circulatory system or with their immune system, or they might have a rash, or they might have a this or that, and they want to be able to help themselves, but they can't have a scan. So they don't know where to start or which programs to use. So this is where self-treatment options come in, using the detox device, the restorative device, and a third device, which is called the energy device, which energizes our cells and protects us from radiation and does a lot of really good foundational work. So if we are going to self-treat, or if we're going to work with tailor-made programs, the first step is always to detox. We'll also support our organs at the same time. But if we don't do the detox bit, it's going to be very difficult to heal or to enhance our health because all those heavy metals and microorganisms will still be wreaking havoc. So while supporting our organs, we need to detox. If you've had a scan, you'll be made a detox program to go away and work with that initially will start clearing out that extracellular matrix area and support your liver and maybe your kidneys and your lymphatic drainage pathways. After 3 months, when you come back, you'll be made a more specific detox program on the AP device that will start targeting the worms or the virus or the bacteria or the mercury or whatever it is. But first we do an initial detox. At the same time, on the RITM device, supportive programs can be made. If you haven't had a scan and you're self-treating, then there are many, many, many programs that you can use for supporting yourself and for detoxing. Now, some of the programs are great to self-treat for simply acute conditions, like having a cold or a cough or a backache or a headache or one of those day-to-day ups and downs. And there's many programs on these devices. You can simply find the program that says headache or anti-migraine or whatever it might be, anti-cold, and you can put it on, and with a bit of luck, your symptoms will go away. But of course, if we really want to start clearing out our body and working at a deeper level, we'll need to get rid of those organisms and toxins and also rebalance and correct the functioning of our major body systems and organs. And so if you can't have a scan, Data Ellis, the company that developed these devices, have put together, in connection with scientists and doctors, a whole range of 4-month protocols that you can work with, starting with an initial detox and restoration protocol. They also have some basic protocols to address basic areas of health like digestion. And then they have many themed protocols that you can choose to work with. They're all 4 months. And here is a little example. I'm going to give you a few examples here. This is an example, might look a bit confusing, and you don't know what you're looking at, of the initial detox and restoration schedule using these devices. You can see on the left, it says month 1, 2, 3, and 4. And here it tells you which device you're going to work with. So in the first month, if you have, not everyone has the energy device, but if you did have the energy device, the recommendation would be in the morning to play a cycle of the program that's called Energy, or it could be more cycles if you are very depleted and fatigued. And this will begin to increase the cellular voltage within the electrical voltage within your cells, so that you have sufficient energy to heal, to detox, to heal. Then after you've done a cycle or two of the energy program, during the day, you move on to the RITM device, which is the restorative, supportive, strengthening device. And you alternate each day, either playing a program called Healthy Day or a program called Health. And I will outline briefly what these do in a moment or two. And then in night, when you're sleeping, you can have the device in your pocket or in a sock or under a bit of tubey grip on your leg or an arm. And you work your way through 4 weeks worth of different detox programs that will each detox a different group of bacteria or viruses or fungi, or I'll go through this in a minute to remind myself what they are myself. I always get muddled up which one does which. And then in the next month, you move on. Some of the programs you just keep going with, but you move on to a cleansing program in the night. And then the third month, you move on to a de-stressing harmonizing program with the energy device. You have a different cleansing program on the RITM device. And on the detox device, you will repeat one of these. Sometimes when people are playing a detox program for a week to detox a bacteria or a virus, they might have some symptoms and might just feel a bit irritable. It doesn't often happen, but if they do, that's a sign that you've got some of that microorganism load. So you would play that program during the third month, but not everybody does notice any irritation, in which case you would play this no parasite program here instead. So basically it tells you, this 4-month schedule tells you what to play on which device and at which time of day. And after those 4 months, you will have done a basic detox. Most people report they feel a bit lighter, a bit easier, a bit cleaner. And you will have begun to rebalance and to build up some of the basic organs and body systems in your body. Now you could either as well or instead of work with one of these basic complexes, because they include a lot of the same programs we've just seen, but they're a little bit more targeted to deal with digestive issues or parasitic issues. So we have, again, a 4-month schedule for each of these. This is an example of the digestion without problems 4-month schedule. You'll see a lot of the programs are the same. This is laying out a little bit differently. This is the company protocol, and I haven't copied it out myself, so it looks a little different. But here you see the name of the device. Here it tells you the time of day or night to use it. And here it tells you the programs to use here. And you'll see some of them are the same. We've got the Healthy Day and the Health program, but we've got some extra programs added in during that first month. And the same is here on the months going forwards. We have a few extra different programs that are added in if you're particularly wanting to work with a digestive issue. Now, there are many themed complexes. So again, all of these are 4 months. They will all tell you exactly what to do. So if you had an issue, once you've done the initial detox, if you had an issue that fell into the category of heart and circulation, or stress, or sleep issues, or joint issues, or women's or men's reproductive health, skin and hair issues, muscle tendon issues, allergy issues, you could work with one of the themed complexes that are, again, here's an example, themed to improve these systems within your body. So this is one to improve the heart and circulation. And you can see there's programs in here like Healthy Heart, like cardiac rhythm normalization, various other healthy heart without headaches, because often headaches are caused through lack of circulation to the head, normal blood pressure. There's very specific extra programs that are added in. Here's an example of women's health, looking at programs to do with women's reproductive health, women's sexuality, and various microorganism programs that might be creating issues with reproductive health. Here's an example, chlamydia, getting rid of chlamydia. So these are just examples of the 4-month schedules that are available. Now we also have 3 schedules that are designed to help people with low immune systems. If you have a tendency for colds, if you think you're catching coronavirus or you've got coronavirus, or if you simply get a lot of infections, you can work with some of these protocols. Here's an example of the infection protocol. So this isn't a 4-month protocol, because this is something you can use to stop infections. So at the first sign of an infection, or if you're recovering from an infection. So these can be incredibly useful. And again, the idea is the same. They tell you which devices, which programs, and when to use them. Then we have some more specialized complexes that, again, it's important to only use when you've worked with the initial detox and restoration complex, or one of those 2 basic ones, the parasites or the digestive complex. So we're looking at things like helping digestive inflammations, helping teeth and gum disease issues, skin issues rather than general skin health. We're looking at weight loss. We're looking at, they call it healthy cell. These are, I think, designed as kind of safe oncology programs. Lyme disease, that's a big one. Had some clients have a lot of success with the Lyme disease protocol, and so on and so forth. There's a big protocol for people over 60, lots of things that affect older people. So again, you can work with these to self-treat. But the key initially is to do the initial detox. So if you're self-treating, it's very tempting to dive in and try to start getting rid of your herpes cold sore or something like that, but it's not going to work so well, and you may well have symptoms and side effects if you haven't done an initial detox. So it's important to work with this. And I mentioned when I showed this earlier that I would just briefly outline some of these programs that have slightly cryptic names, like Healthy Day and Health. So let me just move on to do that, just to give you an idea. First of all, the energy device. It's suggested that for the first couple of months, people work with the energy program to up their cellular voltage, particularly if it's depleted. And we have 2 programs on the energy device to do this. A shorter one called Energy Pro that gives you a kind of quick boost, gives your cells a quick boost of energy, and a 41-minute one, which is a more gentle, ongoing, supportive stimulation of energy. And I find that really kind of bump starts the immune system and gets it working well. For the second 2 months, they suggest using this program called Harmony, which will calm the nervous system, de-stress the system, and as the name suggests, bring about a state of inner harmony, peace. It will calm the psycho-emotional state. So if someone's very anxious and stressed and not able to sleep, it will just help calm all of that so they can feel more centered and able to concentrate in a peaceful way. So the RITM device, it's suggested that when the clients played a cycle of the energy program, that they move on to either Healthy Day or Health, which are 2 slightly kind of cryptic names. People often say, well, what does that mean? What are these? Now, these are big programs that contain lots of smaller programs within them. So you'll see here it says Healthy Day Automatic. An automatic program is a combination program that combines several programs together. And these are kind of the bread and butter of health restoration, because between them, Health and Healthy Day cover most of the body systems and most of the main areas that need support to be able to then heal in a more precise way. So let's just have a look at what these programs contain. So Healthy Day Automatic consists of 7 programs. Active Protection, which is a program that shields us from the effects of radiation, electrosmog, and from other people's funky energy, and even shields us from some bugs, from picking them up. It has a program to regulate blood circulation, to ensure our blood circulates easily and with a steady rhythm throughout the body. We have a de-stressing program, anti-stress. We have a supportive detoxing program, a program to balance the digestive system, a program to balance and regulate our hormonal system, and a program which is called 7 chakras, which simply means it's ensuring that the energy that flows up and down through the spine flows harmoniously and kind of equally and evenly, rather than getting blocked in certain places, which means that some organs are then depleted. So it's just helping the internal energy flow. So some really important pieces of work there. And we alternate that each day with the health program, Health Automatic, which has an immune protection program, so helping the immune system, a cellular respiration program, so ensuring that our cells are working optimally, a vegetative regulation program, so just balancing and regulating all the organs affected by the autonomic nervous system, and then a digestive kind of intestinal program to help the intestines and some of the digestive system. So between those programs, we can really support our health and get ourselves into a much better state. And many people find when they've played those programs for a few months that other niggles begin to clear up, even though you may not have addressed them properly. Now, one of the programs on that initial detox schedule I showed you a few slides back was called Complete Cleansing. And this is a big bumper program that we play in the 3rd month of that schedule to help maximize the energy that each individual organ has. It helps support all the different organs and cleanses them by helping them to remove toxins, strengthening so they can remove their own toxins. And this is based on our circadian rhythm. So it's important when working with this program to start it at, I think it's 8 o'clock in the morning. And then as it moves through the different organs, it will be moving through those organs at the maximal or the optimal time of the day to support those organs. So quite a clever program. The Complete Cleansing program includes programs like active protection again, blood circulation, cleaning the kidneys, cleaning the lymph, and getting the hormones working well. So lots of support to help the body to do its own cleansing, its own detoxifying processes. Whereas on the AP device, just mention this briefly, the AP device is the device that's designed to do the eliminating, the destroying of pathogens, the breaking down of toxins, the flushing out of the toxins. So it's a device that works in quite a different way. Its frequencies are delivered more aggressively than the RITM device that we've just been looking at, which is more gentle. Now, when I say aggressive, I don't mean that we're going to be harmed by it. It's just that it delivers the frequencies quite persistently, consistently and persistently, whereas the other device just delivers them in a slightly more laid-back manner, slightly more gentle manner. So when doing that initial detox program, we're going to switch programs every week. So the first week, we're going to play Mode 1 Automatic. And this is a program that addresses ridding the body of a whole selection of viruses, protozoan, and removes their toxins. Then we move on to bacterial loads, particularly Streptococcus and Staphylococcus, and remove the toxins that they produce. Then we move on to removing bacterial issues in the digestive tract and the urogenital system. So a different set of bacteria will be addressed there. And then we move on to yeast, mold and fungi. So we have a week where we start removing candida and general molds and fungi and remove the toxins that they release themselves. So these are the basic things. Obviously, you might have some other viruses or bacterial issues going on in your body, but these are the basic things that it's really important to remove that a lot of us have unknowingly. And then in the fourth month of the detox program on the AP, we'll be playing a parasitic detox program. It's called No Parasites Automatic, and this will detox the body, particularly the liver and the pancreas and the intestines, from all the sorts of parasites you find in the digestive tract and general parasites that you find around the body. And it will remove the toxins released by those parasites. So it's a really good thing to do to clear up some of those creepy crawlies that you may have inside. Now, there's lots more information I could give you about this, but I'm aware you've been listening for a while now, so I'm going to wind this up. So do get in contact if you would like to know more about self-treatment or about having a scan, or if you want to come and train as a practitioner to learn how to do the scans and learn more about how to interpret them and how to make the tailor-made treatment programs. If you want to have a look on my website, you can find the details of all of these self-treatment programs on the page called Downloads. There will be blue buttons like this one at the bottom where you can download the initial detox program, and then there's links to all the other detox and restoration schedules, all the themed ones and the specialized ones. So you can find them on my website here. It will look like this. These are the links to the different options you have. And these are the 3 mini devices here in the middle of the picture that are mentioned in each of those 3-month schedules. So let me come off the screen share. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope this gives you a little bit of an idea about both what a diagnostic bioresonance scan can reveal and begins to get you thinking about ways of treatment, whether it's treating yourself with the mini devices, with tailor-made programs, or launching into some of those 4-month protocols. And that's just the beginning. There's all sorts of other things that you can do as well. And of course, there's other treatment devices, not just these minis, but the mini ones are the ones that most people will use because they're portable and so easy to use. So thank you for listening to this.